Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. We have Vice President and Minister of Public Security, Mr. Khemraj Ramjattan, who has joined us to provide an update from his perspective. He would have been coming out of a emergency national security meeting which was held at State House and called by the President this evening. Minister Ramjattan will give us a brief update and he will take questions from you. We'll continue to observe the usual protocol. Vice President Ramjattan.
Thank you very much, Imran, and members of the press. You know, the dire situation that we have found ourselves in. Indeed, yes, we had an emergency National Security Committee meeting. And also, immediately after that, knowing of the situation at Luziknan, I went with Mr. David Patterson there to do a situational assessment, because it's a lot of work that has to be done to make comfortable 1,000 men, more or less, in the open. Of course, it's a heavily fenced area, but in view of what has happened at Camp Street and it being literally flattened by the fires to all those wooden buildings and even more, it was necessary that I also make that assessment with the Minister of Infrastructure. It is not very nice a situation, as you would appreciate. But indeed, we have certain obligations. We have to secure the prisoners. We have to secure what remains of Camp Street. We have to ensure that we make every effort to catch those who are on the run and ensure the safety and security of the people of Georgetown and those in its environs, and even the entire country, if I may say so. The immediate task, of course, is to ensure that those prisoners, almost just above 1,000, are going to be secured for this evening and probably the next 48 hours. And I had to make the call as to where that will be, and in association with the prime technicians, that is fire and director of prison and commissioner of police, it was decided it will be at Luziknan. Apart from the prison at Luziknan, there was the construction of a fenced area for purposes of building another prison some years ago. And so it is secure enough to put the men in. The trouble is that we have some difficulties because they are out in the elements. And that's not nice. But of course, it's a crisis situation. And we couldn't think of any other place because we felt that that might be making insecure the prisoners themselves and other citizens. There were some other options which we felt should not be utilized. We had thoughts of some schools, but the way that they're behaving, to the extent of when we put them into the building opposite the Camp Street Prison, they burned that down too. So we couldn't risk putting them in any schools or other suggestions that were coming up from a number of people. We are in the process of ensuring that they get water and they get the facilities for their comfort, toilets and all of that, portable toilets and a whole host of other things. And make the arrangements for a number of them to be placed in other prisons tomorrow where there is space. As you would appreciate, it's not much space around. And so we will have to do a couple of things that might be extraordinary in the nature of the circumstances, that will see to it that at least we make as much space as possible. It's 1,000 men we're talking about, and some of the other prisons can probably just accommodate 200-300. You still have 700. And from all indications, the flattening by fire of Camp Street means that not in the near future you could go back to Camp Street. And we have what I'll call a big crisis in our hands. We are going to come up with the ideas, of course we have to, and we will have to get special efforts made to get the space so that we can house these people in better condition. We are getting some tents as we speak, tents and extra lighting. We're getting into Lusignan. It's a closed off area, so I hope that after this you don't hustle down there. It's going to be dangerous. Please, and you're not going to block up that road any further. But we're going to have as much as possible the efforts there to make it accommodating for them. It's very difficult, and we will definitely tell you more in other updates that I will have for you. I'll take some questions at this stage.
Minister
Dennis,
at the political level,
can you pass a microphone? Can you pass a microphone to Dennis quickly,
at the
please?
political level, sir, could you say what are some of the theories you're coming up with?
Go ahead,
What are
Dennis.
some of the political theories you're coming up with that may have been responsible or motivated these prisoners to burn down the prison? And secondly, what are some of the major recommendations that were implemented coming out of the Commission of Inquiry?
Well, I'll take the second one first. After the March incident last year, major recommendations were made, and of course one was to ensure that remand prisoners get early trials. We spent approximately $60 million at a night court shift for some time period, after speaking to both Mr. Carl Singh, then Chancellor, and the top echelons of the Judicial Service Commission there, and that was done. We also made arrangements for a set of monies to start the expansion of Mazaruni, and this budget 2017 at that political level we allocated, I think, approximately 300 million to start these administrative staff buildings, because we realized that once you start having more prisons built there, you'd have to also have accommodation for staff, as was recommended too. And we had started with that. I think the $300 million was allocated, a contract was awarded, and work is going on presently. There were other recommendations that there must be earlier trials at the magistrates court level, the high court level, and so on. And of course, that was attempted. I know of at least trials having commenced and so on. But it still did not take down the remand numbers in the Georgetown prison, as well, it is not Georgetown prison anymore, but those who were there that constituted this almost 1,144, 593 or thereabouts, almost touching 600, were on remand. The others were convicted. So that shows a proportion that is even bigger than the 50% that were there on remand. Remand, I think almost 200 for murder. And the statistics will show that for serious offenses, it was a high number. But more than that, we also had some of them who could not pay their bail, and who, when the bail was granted, couldn't get that. So that also helped accumulate that very high amount of people there in a prison that was not made for 1,100 persons. The other question you mentioned,
Motivation.
what was the motivation? Well, at this preliminary stage, we are I don't know if the director of the director of prisons addressed that, but what we are being told is that some very serious criminals, including Royden and Dennis Williams from the massacre at Bartica, and a number of other fellows who were there for murder and robbery murder, got the assistance of other sections of the prison to start major distractions through fire so that they could make their escape. Now, it is obviously not the case where the entire prison population was supporting them, but they had their couple mischievous guys who started putting up these fires for purposes of getting rid of the attention of the prisoners, wardens, and so on. And they did what they did. So I rather suspect it was all planned from inside. That is my personal opinion from the information I am getting.
That is what the director of prisons has also confirmed, or in his earlier press conference.
Well, that is excellent.
Mentioning the names that you would have mentioned as well.
There's another one, very
Varswick.
Varswick's
Yes. Name was mentioned.
That's
as well.
right. Yeah.
Marcel, go ahead.
Yes.
Marcel.
Minister, you said we might have to do a couple of things that might seem extraordinary. I wanted to know if you could say what those extraordinary measures would be, and if you can say if at your security meeting this evening, if it was discussed, if the moving of the Camp Street Prison was discussed, the moving altogether out of the city.
No, that was not discussed, the moving of the Camp Street Prison to altogether. There were a number of things that were discussed, but we were thinking the immediate 24, 48, 72 hours time period. We were not thinking what you were talking probably next year, next 2 years, because to have a prison at this stage, that is not foremost in our minds, please. As I said, secure the prisoners, secure what remains of the Camp Street Prison, catch the fugitives, and of course, our security and safety as a nation. Because notwithstanding that the men are now in a fenced, highly walled, fenced area at Luziknan, you know, it is not still the safest of conditions, safe for them because they're out in the elements and so on. So our minds were not focused on what we're going to build a new prison or whatever you're thinking about. No, we were just immediately on to how we deal with these 4 major priority areas.
Minister Ramjattan does have to go off to some other meetings this evening, but we will take a few more questions.
The extraordinary thing has to do, how could we lessen the amount of remands there? And I'll tell you what one of it has to do. It has to do with a lot of prisoners who would have served some time, 3 years for possession. It was I have the statistics with me somewhere, and a lot of them are there for possession of narcotics and trafficking in narcotics and all of that. And they have served some time, and they were of good behavior. We might have to put them. There is what is called of good behavior an early release date and a late release date, when you're going to serve the entire full 5 years, which is like 9 months period. That's 45 months. But if you're of good behavior, you can get some remissions from me. I can give you, as minister and as the authority, that is one of the extraordinary measures I'm going to think about now, ensuring that they come off at the earliest possible date, and especially if they're of good behavior. There are other things, if we have to go back and ask the Chancellor, now Chancellor, to start back the process of reviewing at an earlier stage, probably tomorrow to start, the process of going to these prisons to do some situational analysis of how many remands are there, those who can be put on lesser bail so that their family can get the bail, so that they too, that's an important thing.
Just to reiterate, these are, Minister Ramjattan, relating to non-violent.
Oh, all of these are non-violent.
Just to reiterate that.
Yeah, the lesser offenses, not as serious offenses.
Gary?
Mr. Samuels complained about the lack of capital investment in the prison. Can you say why it is the administration is focusing on administration as against the actual prison services? And, or go ahead.
No, well, it is also because there is a lack of monies for these investments. We have to bail out sugar. We have to do so many other things. And that is what is cramping our style in relation to what we have to do for other sectors. And if people could understand it, and that is why we are saying that we got to halt certain spendings in other areas so that we will now have to put in priority areas.
We had 17 dead in the first fire and now this incident. Is it time for you to give up the security sector?
I don't know. That's a decision that the president and myself will have to decide, I suppose. Not the president, primarily. But when you have a situation, look, if there is a fault on my part, well, fine, the president can do that. And that is what generally you have. Or I would have resigned if it was a fault on my part. But do you think it's a fault on my part when some criminals there who are going to ask for distractions and get people to do all of that? I don't know.
No, but the lack of capital investment.
Well, a lack of capital investment, and what, you want to change the whole cabinet? Because if I ask for that, but the cabinet decide to give sugar. Good. Next question, please.
Gordon Mosley, final question.
Mr. Ramjattan, again, coming back to the capital investments, the prison officials here earlier raised some concern about that. These recommendations handed in by that COI would have been done since June last year. We're now in July, 1 year later.
That's true.
Why weren't many of those recommendations put in place? Simple things like better security checks getting into the prison, better scanners. They're complaining even those small things were not put in place outside of this new prison or larger prison or expansion. There were a few simple things that could have been put in place to improve security at Camp Street.
Well, we understand that indeed all of those little things were done. I don't know what was said here by Mr. Samuels, but a number of those things were put in place. And that is why we have caught a number of prison warders. As a matter of fact, about 6 or 7 were caught carrying in cigarettes and carrying lighters and all of that. It is because these things were done and the security cameras and so on caught them. I understand those things, that the smaller things that you said were all catered for, allocated, and the purchases were made. So I don't know what it is that is being said here.
I don't think Mr. Samuels complained about that, but Gordon is saying that generally that was said, but he did not complain of that.
Oh yeah, most of the recommendations, as we are seeing, that we could have afforded have been implemented. But we still have problems. It is not as if once you do those recommendations, and even if you do the checklist of the recommendations, if, as happened here, people, knowing that 17 died last time, go and light up matches to burn down the wooden section. Well, they really mean business, boss.
Is there a political motive behind it?
Not as far as I know, and I don't think that there might have been. But that does not mean that that will be eliminated. In the process of investigating, we are going to check on that too.
In just over 24 hours, you'll be meeting with Cabinet. Cabinet will have its regular meeting, and they're already talking of budget discussions for the 2018 budget. What will you say to the Cabinet in terms of, now that you're dealing with the situation, what will you say to them as the minister responsible for security?
I will make my case again, just like I did last year, and hopefully, well, because of the crisis situation, we will need more monies now for the prison system. Camp Street will have to be rehabilitated quickly. There will be emergency funds that will be required to at least put some roof so that we can get back, clean up that place of all the debris there and proceed. I don't know where we can immediately get at least a safe, secure area where remands could be held and so on. Because you need people close next to the chief magistrate's court and this court and that court and so on. You need people there to go to Sparnam court and to Lusignan, wheresoever, and Cove and John. It is important. So we will have to have a place for remand, and notwithstanding the fire, it still has the base for the quickest and most expeditious of construction to go on.
We'll wrap up with a final question. Gary.
Repairs are just back to square one. When do we get to actually implementing the recommendations, these substantive recommendations?
I think that issue was addressed. We will have to have a more extensive answer at a later time. Gary, we'll allow a final question from Leroy.
Gary, let me just tell you this. We went through the thing. It's $6 billion minimum to construct a new prison, and that will take about 3 years. Okay? So understand that.
Leroy, can you use the microphone? Final question.
Any comments or any concerns raised with the government by the ABC countries, the reps here, or any other ambassadors here, in light of what took place this afternoon?
No, we haven't spoken to any of them.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Minister Ramjattan, thank you for taking time out for giving us this update. Good evening.